Austria, Österreich. We have a 4.5. What's going on beneath this area, guys? At exactly 1:59 in the morning, people across Eastern Austria were suddenly ripped out of their sleep. Beds moved and cupboard doors slammed and rattled. This is what they're telling us. Furniture visibly shifted in Austria. Would you think that? So one person in the city of Graz said the shaking threw them out of bed. Again, in Österreich. In Vienna, Wien, someone on the 23rd floor watched objects swinging inside the room. This is something that we usually only hear from other places along the Pacific Ring of Fire, for example. Today is a weird day because we just had a 5.1 in Texas in the North Panhandle. Very mysterious earthquake. Check it out in the end screen because that has something in common with the New Madrid fault. But here, Austria, another resident thought a neighbor had turned on a washing machine in the middle of the night. I wonder what kind of washing machine is that rattles you out of bed. But of course, it was not a washing machine. Something had broken beneath the Austrian mountains. This is a mountainous region. It's a Kurort. That means it's a recreational area, village with lots of hotels where you can do wellness and stuff like this. It has a famous railway line. So this is what you think about Austria, idyllic. So earthquake. If I told you there was a landslide, mountain collapse, something like Blatten or whatever, yeah, you'd probably believe me. But 4.5 in this area sounds really, really weird. But that's truth. It has just happened. 4.5 struck near the Semmering Pass, directly between Lower Austria and Styria, the Steiermark. Semmering Pass, that's like a mountain road. And although, of course, if you're used to California and other areas, 4.5 does not sound enormous, but one number makes this earthquake much more concerning. And for Austria, this is quite enormous, we have to say. And here it comes. It was shallow. It happened only about 4 kilometers. That's 2.5 miles beneath the surface. This is exceptionally shallow. So first you might think, okay, is this rumbling? Is this shaking? Is there a mountain breaking apart? Is that the case, right? But wait, the depth is not the only surprise here. So, because this earthquake did not strike a random piece of mountain rock, we have to say. It occurred inside one of Austria's most active and complicated. Here it comes. Tell me in the comments if what I'm about to say, if you knew that. One of Austria's most active and complicated earthquake corridors. Whoa! So, scientists have already documented an unusual sequence of stronger earthquakes that is migrating through this region. So, how and why? So, what fault moved beneath Semmering? What is causing a 4.5? Why are earthquakes returning to the same corridor? That's a question. And does this shallow earthquake that just happened, is that the end of the movement or not? Or is it the beginning of another sequence? So Geosphere Austria has mapped this earthquake and has a list of earthquakes. You see it on the map behind me. You see the epicenter is approximately 8 kilometers. That's roughly 5 miles southwest of Gloggnitz and around 15 kilometers or 9 miles east of Mürz. For my English-speaking people, try to pronounce that. Mürz. It's an interesting village. So the earthquake struck directly beneath that mountain corridor that is connecting the two regions. And Geosphere, that's basically the Austrian USGS, they have received numerous reports from Eastern, Lower Austria and Styria that the shaking was detected and that they really felt it. Like I said at the beginning, they were thrown out of bed. But also, the shaking was weakly detected by some people in Vienna, in Wien. So authorities said isolated light damage could be possible close to the epicenter. But the experience that is reported by residents shows why this earthquake felt much larger than the actual magnitude 4.5. I mean, shallow, let's not forget that. But near that affected region, one person was worried. They feared that glasses were about to fall from a cabinet. This is not normal in like Austria. A resident in Aspang woke up to cupboard doors clattering. Someone in Graz said jolted out of bed. So another person said that for the first time, everyone inside the house woke up simultaneously because they all felt it. From Vienna, we hear hanging objects, chandeliers moved, floors were trembling, and furniture visibly shifted. Have you heard that ever before from Vienna or Austria? People, and here, this is interesting, people also reported that they felt possible movement in other countries, in Hungary and Bratislava. Although those individual reports at the moment, they are still unverified. This was not a long, gentle rolling motion. For many people, this thing, boof, arrived sudden, sharp jolt. And the reason why this happened was directly beneath them. So at just 4 kilometers, 2.5 miles, the energy of this earthquake had basically very little rock to travel through before it was reaching the surface and homes and people that were there. So a deeper earthquake can spread its energy across a wider area before it reaches towns and buildings. So shallow earthquake delivers that energy much closer to people standing above it and to structures and can damage structures. But now comes the first major question. What fault is hiding beneath this part of the Austrian Alps? So the earthquake occurred within the broader Mürz Semmering southern Vienna Basin seismic corridor. There, I said it. Try to repeat it, guys. The major structure that is running through this region is the Mürz Fault System, which continues basically eastwards from the Mürz Valley through the Semmering area and towards faults beneath the southern Vienna Basin. So this is a major zone. Believe it or not, this is a major zone of crustal weakness. Basically, it was created when sections of the Eastern Alps were compressed and then forced sideways. So, but right now, as this just happened, it would be premature to claim that basically one precisely named surface fault has already been identified as the source of this earthquake. Research that has been conducted already in the Semmering region has shown that yes, earthquakes do follow the Mürz system and its continuation towards the Pottendorf Fault. That's also an interesting name of a fault line. But the scientists have given a warning that basically ordinary preliminary earthquake locations are often not accurate enough to connect an individual earthquake to one exact fault segment. And that is important to have this distinction. We know now the broad fault system that is down there is known. The exact piece that slipped and caused this magnitude 4.5 at almost 2 in the morning is not yet confirmed. If we see aftershocks, that's the interesting part, because where we see the aftershocks, they might actually reveal which fault line. So if smaller earthquakes, hopefully aftershocks, hopefully this was not a foreshock, begin forming a narrow line between the mountains, scientists may be able to map the direction and the length of the rupture, how much of the fault ruptured during this 4.5. But there's another reason this location has immediately attracted attention amongst scientists. This is not the first time that the ground around Glocknitz and Semmering has suddenly become active. So it's not that long ago. During the spring of 2023, Glocknitz experienced a swarm of at least 17 noticeable earthquakes. So the strongest also has reached magnitude 4.2. So A geosphere seismologist, Anton Vogelmann, explained that Glocknitz sits at the beginning of the southern Vienna Basin's active stress field. So is this the beginning? Is the stress then rupturing? Is it traveling? The eastern section of crust is basically moving northeast by several millimeters each year. And that movement is gradually loading up the faults until basically part of that stress is released through earthquakes. Same system, like locked and loaded, poof, earthquake. So we can say, taking this as proof, that this earthquake right now is not an isolated anomaly. It's not an anomaly, but the timeline becomes more interesting when we look beyond 2023. So let's do that. A study of Eastern Austria has documented unusually strong seismic activity between 2021 and 2024, including 5 earthquakes between magnitude 3.8 and 4.6 across the Vienna Basin and the Mürz Fault Systems. So researchers found out that the seismic activity appeared to migrate from northeast to southwest. But even more strikingly, the calculated focal depth became progressively shallower in that same direction. So it was traveling and it was also getting shallower. Why? Researchers said this pattern could suggest a reactivation of major fault systems in this region. Whoa! What does that mean? Does Vienna need to worry about strong earthquakes? And after this active period, now another strong earthquake has struck near Semmering at a preliminary depth of only 4 kilometers, 2.5 miles. So this is not over. Is it restarting or is it intensifying? Of course, that does not prove that today's earthquake is the next step in that exact migration or escalation. Different earthquake catalogs, station coverage, and calculation methods can produce different depth estimates. We know that. But definitely this has created a question that for now we cannot answer from this one red dot on the map. Is this another isolated fracture inside a complicated fault zone? Or, the or is what should worry us a lot more. Or is seismic activity continuing to shift through the same regional system? And that answer, I can tell you where this will come from. This will be deducted from what is coming next. But before that, there's another theory already being raised whenever the ground moves near Semmering. Could that enormous Semmering base tunnel project have triggered the earthquake? This is interesting. We know fracking can trigger earthquakes. Earth movement, if you build a tunnel, I assume you have to blast some mountains inside. So the tunnel explanation has already been investigated in the 2023 swarm, and then at that time it has been rejected by Geosphere Austria. It seems those earlier earthquakes occurred approximately 10 to 14 kilometers, that's 6 to 9 miles beneath the surface. So that's deeper, right? The tunnel was only several hundred meters, several hundred feet underground. So construction at the surface cannot realistically produce tectonic earthquakes many kilometers or miles deeper inside the crust. It doesn't make sense because you're not building a tunnel that's going down vertically, right? So this earthquake right now is way shallower than the 2023 swarm. So reported depth of 2.5 miles, 4 kilometers. But it's still many times deeper than the tunnel. And it's quite strong, right? Would it be that strong down there if above it you would do something in the tunnel? And then, of course, as we said, the position in this historically active seismic corridor also points that this is probably natural tectonic stress rather than this construction. So what is actually moving the Mürz and Vienna Basin fault systems largely accommodate sideways movement. So the eastern alpine crust is basically being compressed by forces transmitted through the Adriatic region. So while crustal blocks that are located a little farther east move towards the Pannonian Basin. So the mountains that you see here, idyllic Austrian landscape, they may appear solid to the eye, but entire sections of crust underneath are slowly being forced sideways, basically around one another. Isn't that amazing? Most of the time, that movement is almost invisible, of course, few millimeters each year. But then when a fault becomes stuck, right, locked and loaded, stress begins to build. And when that resistance is finally exceeded, the rock can move in less time than it takes a sleeping person to understand what's happening, right? But this causes the question that now everyone that's in or near Semmering wants answered right now. Could something larger follow? This is what worries everyone, right? A magnitude 4.5 earthquake definitely cannot be used to predict that a major earthquake is coming. The 2023 swarm lasted through a series of smaller shocks, and then Geosphere said that swarm provided no evidence of a approaching larger earthquake, and none did come, right? Most earthquakes of this size, thankfully, are followed only by smaller aftershocks or by nothing felt at all. But they can be foreshocks. It's happening, right? Immediately after an earthquake, we cannot know with absolute certainty if that was the largest event in the sequence, right? Time will tell. And we can only call it main shock if in the sequence after, if there's no larger earthquake that follows, but that takes a little time. So the next hours and days are important. So we have to watch out for three developments. So first is whether aftershocks will begin clustering along one clear underground plane. Second is whether those events remain close to the same depth, or will they return to deeper levels that we have seen during earlier activity. And the third is whether this sequence is actually migrating away from the epicenter towards Glocknitz, Mürz or the southern Vienna Basin even, right? So, of course, even if that were to happen, those developments, guys, they would not automatically mean that something larger is coming, but at least they could reveal which fault moved and whether the surrounding crust is continuing to adjust. The type of fault is interesting, right? Which one? So then we can know what's the risk. So I would say we would call that an unusual mountain earthquake, but it's only partly correct. It's unusual because Austria does not frequently experience shallow magnitude 4.5 earthquakes that are strong enough to wake people across multiple regions and shake things, move furniture, and throw them out of bed. That is something we don't hear from there. But earthquakes beneath these mountains are not geologically impossible. This is what we have learned right now. Mountains exist, of course, because the crust has been compressed, fractured, and displaced for millions of years. So this comes with shaking. The valleys that we have around Mürz, Semmering, and Glocknitz, they follow some of those zones of weaknesses. And the landscape, if you look closely and if you know what to look out for, it does not even hide this tectonic history because it was built by it, so to speak, right? I will watch the aftershocks for you, and if there's something interesting developing, I will tell you. So subscribe, stick with the channel, but watch what happened in Texas. This is interesting, to say the least. So really, I see you there in a second.